And welcome everyone. We should be live. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you guys are indeed in the chat. Let me know that you can hear me properly. So this is a live stream from South London. It is nearly 8 p.m. UK time. So we're going for a live walk tonight. We've got about 10 minutes before to start. So if you're watching a replay, if you are not live with us right now, but you're watching the replay in the next few days or weeks or whatever it might be, feel free to skip the next 10 minutes. Sound and picture good. Perfect. Thank you, Marilyn. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Tish. So we've got about 10 minutes before to start. And Tish, here to get back to you about the fire, I didn't click on the article because it said huge fire in London next to London Bridge, and the picture looked like Wapping. I mean, it's not far from London Bridge, but probably even further east. So I was like, no, I'm not clicking on the headline that makes it even more. I mean, not that it's more dramatic to be in London Bridge than Wapping, but I didn't click. Hailey. And welcome everyone that just joined. So if anyone was completely new to me, we're just waiting for everyone to connect. We've got about 10 minutes to go. So once again, anyone watching the replay, if you don't care about the hellos, hello, how are you, nice to see you, feel free to skip the next 10 minutes. And welcome Sarah. So we'll be starting at 8 precisely. Now, you know the drill. I'm gonna have to tap the microphone 3 times. I'm just gonna check that it's working properly. Let me know if you've heard a triple tap. And welcome, Singing Cheryl. Nice to see you here as usual. So this is a live streamed walk. So if you happen to be, even if you're watching the replay, if you've got micro little cuts, that means that the gods of the internet have abandoned us for a second or so. Hopefully it will be good, but just so you know, this is a live from the streets. I laugh. You had a dream about me, a live stream a hairdresser appointment. That would have been a fun live. Sometimes dreams are strange. I've got a little dream catcher on my wrist, but it doesn't work. I still do weird dreams myself. And welcome Samantha, and welcome everyone that just joined. We've got a few minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Oh, your phone is buffering. Sorry, Jenny. I hope it's on your side and it's not over here. It's hard to tell sometimes. Welcome, Pauline. Oh, thank you, Cheryl. Let me give you a glimpse of the view. We are in Streatham at the moment. I'll tell you about that building straight in the middle as soon as we officially kick off. It is a very infamous address. But let's not say too... Oh, the numbers have gone funny. It went to 0 for a second, now we're back to normal numbers. I hope it didn't cut out. Might just be a little bug in the system. No buffering for you, says Tish. Perfect. Hi, Wendy. So 6 minutes to go. Oh, you can see me now. Perfect. Good, good. So we've got 6 minutes. So again, for anyone that might be new, of course, this is a live stream, so I'll be reacting to the chat. Sarah, no, I've just put my jumper back on because in the evening it gets a bit chilly, but this afternoon was fine. I was wearing a t-shirt. Although the last few days have been very cold and wet and windy, and people went back to the winter jackets. How is the luncheon? So yeah, feel free to interact with the chat as usual. I'm gonna be careful myself when reading the chat because I've had a nasty comment under another live stream. It just read, too much hums on hers, very difficult to listen to. That's it. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, at first I took it very personally and I was going to reply with a very cynical answer. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's still feedback. And I've watched a bit of myself paying attention to my hums and hers. And I've realized I do a lot of hers. It's not, most of the time, it's not because my speech is not fluid and that I'm thinking about what's next to say. It's actually when I'm reading the chat. Because, you know, if like I'm in the middle of, I don't know, a story of anything, and I don't know why when I'm reading the chat, instead of just going silent, I just go like, oh, Linda, blah, blah, you know. I don't, see, I've just done it right now. I don't know why I do that. Maybe because I don't want you to think that I've bugged or I don't know. So I've got to be careful with my hums and hers. Yes, hers are, I mean, are very French. Hums, that's probably a bit more English, but the hums, they're more natural, I think, the hums. But that's when I'm reading the chat. So I'm gonna be careful not to produce those interesting sounds. I probably shouldn't have told you because now you're gonna be paying attention as well. Hi Tariq, welcome. Right, let's see what time it is. Oops, oopsie. 4 minutes to go. And welcome, she who must be loved. And the numbers have gone back to 0 again. And back to normal. It's probably a little bug in the system. I don't know whether it's YouTube or Prism Live, but as long as you're still here, we're good. Because when the numbers go funny, it can be funny because it's back to 0 again. Well, I can see that you guys are still in the chat, so that's okay. You never noticed the hums. Good to know, Tariq. And now the numbers are back. Is it the same on your side? Does it go from 0 to 21 or whatever it is? Or does it say the right numbers? 0 again. You're sitting with the popcorn. Perfect. Send me one. Thanks, Sam. One day we might be able to digitally share the popcorns. There might be AI fake popcorns coming up to you, but that'll be coming one day. Oh, you never noticed either? Well, that's good. And you know what? That tour, it was the tour in Dublin about the reincarnation case. There was so much going on. There was a terrible wind, a terrible signal, and it's very interesting that the only thing that bothered him was my hums, because I'm sure there was far worse that would stop the comprehension. And welcome Ava from Toronto. And Herbie is here. Welcome Emma. Right, let's see. I think it might or might not be time. 1 minute. 1 minute to go. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm literally chatting to you. You know, I think some people might be used to listen to podcasts or even videos, and a lot of them are AI voices nowadays anyway. So at least I suppose they prove that I'm real and I'm not an AI and I'm not scripted. I'm literally just telling you stories on the top of my head. Okay, good, so you can see the right numbers. Oh, every time I say that, it goes back to 0. That's so odd. It doesn't matter, as long as I can see that you're here in the chat. Right, it should be time to go now. Let's just double check. It is indeed, oh, that's not what I meant to do. It is indeed 8 p.m. UK time, so let's flip the camera around and let's go for a little walk. Now, I'm starting here on Amberside Avenue in Streatham because I wanted to show you this building here. The big white house in front of you. I'm gonna try not to stay too long in front of the building because I don't want to be creeping out the tenants or the lodgers, whoever they are. But this used to be a major brothel in the 70s. That was the house of Cynthia Payne. Let me show you Cynthia. Some of you might remember the story. Some of you might remember the story. Here is Cynthia in front of her house. It was, well, you know what, I'll tell you the story as we walk, because I don't want to stay here too long. One of the tenants probably think I'm a weirdo already, because I've seen a young little blonde lady coming in earlier. Actually, I was walking right behind her, then she got home, and then I was just there staring at her building. I was actually counting the mailboxes. You see there are 6, so it's been subdivided into 6 little apartments now. And anyway, then she came out again to check the mail, and I'm still there staring at her building. So she probably thought I was a weirdo or some kind of a stalker. So I don't want to be standing here for too long. But yes, and exactly, Tariq. It is. Now, before I tell you the story, there's an apartment inside available to buy. Now, at the time of Cynthia Payne, she owned, I believe, the full building because she had quite a few bedrooms upstairs for customers. But it looks like it's been subdivided into 6 little apartments, and one of them is on the rental market. Let me show you the pictures, and you tell me how much you think that would cost you. It's a share of the freehold, so that's a bit complicated because you don't really get the full freehold. But anyway, how much do you think that would cost you to buy a 2-bedroom apartment in such an infamous location? The girl living inside was quite young. I kind of wanted to tell her, do you know what happened in your bedroom? But you know what? I didn't. I don't want anyone to have any wet dreams because of me, you know. Usually I would give people nightmares because usually I cover murder locations. But tonight it's more sex party location. So I don't think she would mind knowing. Tariq, you're quite close. It's a little bit less. Tish, a bit less. Lee, you're a bit too high for this one. Streatham is nice, but it's a bit far south. We are in the borough of Lambeth at the moment. Lambeth is the gayest borough in London. Well, mainly because of Vauxhall. We have a lot of, we used to have a lot of gay clubs in Vauxhall. There are a bit fewer nowadays. Cheryl, a bit less. Actually, you guys are all a bit too high. Nikki, you're the closest so far. Yeah, it's a nice area, but we're quite far south. Sarah, a bit less. Right, let me show you the answer. 500,000. So it's not too bad, but you know, it is Streatham. Well, this street is quite posh, to be honest, with large houses and quite nice and clean, but the rest of Streatham is not that posh. Now, let me remove those images and let's go. Now, let me tell you about the brothel. So Cynthia Payne, some of you might remember, I did try to tell you, oh Lee, you were the closest. I did try to tell you her story when we went down to Bognor Regis on the south coast although I had a terrible wind and rain, and it was quite hard to focus on the story. But I did try to tell you, because she was born there. She was born in Bognor, and her mum died when, I think she was 10 years old when her mother died. That would have been in the 40s. I think she was born in 1932. And her dad, Hamilton, he did not really take, well, he gave her to nannies and stuff. He didn't take as much care of her as he probably should have. She didn't have the best relationship with him at that point. Things will change at some point. And she didn't do best at school, and she ended up working as a waitress. Oh, Pauline, you were the closest. Yeah, she ended up working as a waitress, and she met a sex worker, and she started to rent a flat for her and then sublet it to the sex worker. And she made quite a bit of money doing that. So then she rented a second flat and a third one, and she ended up having 4 flats that she was subletting to sex workers. That was already illegal at the time. You know, we had the Sex Work Act in 1956, I think, about. So selling your body in the UK is not illegal, but brothels are. And a brothel, it's not only a dirty little place, as you can imagine. Any accommodation with more than 2 prostitutes that would. Oof, sorry, it's so windy that the gimbal is moving. Yeah, so any accommodation with more than 2 ladies working together, that would classify as a brothel. Which is very sad, because of course, you know, brothels are actually much better. It's much safer for the sex workers, because, you know, at least they're not alone if something happens, because it's a very dangerous job, because obviously you don't know who you're meeting most of the time, and some men can be violent. So it's a shame that brothels are actually illegal, but they are. So Cynthia was already doing illegal stuff. And at some point she had, well, one of the sex workers she worked with, she couldn't pay, and she had to pay the landlord. And of course she had to bribe the landlords every so often, because they knew quite a lot. So they knew that it was illegal activity happening in the apartments. And well, one day she ended up having to sleep with one of the landlords to kind of pay him off, because she didn't have the money. And she thought, you know what, if I'm gonna be a sex worker, I'm gonna do it well. And she looked into bondage and stuff. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that on YouTube. I might, well, let's see what happens with the monetization of the video. Anyway, she became a bit what we'd call today a dominatrix, you know. She realized that a lot of men were into that, and they also explored with cross-dressing and all that. And she made quite a lot of money. So much money, actually, that eventually she was able to buy a property here in Streatham. Now, Streatham, it's a very anonymous neighborhood. You know, it's not a fancy place. It's not like if you were in the middle of Chelsea or anywhere. She then started to have some amazing sex parties. She would invite men, older men mainly. She did not like the youngsters. She actually had an age limit. They had to be over the age of 40 years old. And she would give a discount to pensioners. I don't know many brothels doing that. She wanted to save them from their loneliness, and it was actually a fairly safe place. You know, the ladies selling their bodies were not obliged to have sex with anybody. The way she would do it is the men would come, and hi Sandrine, and welcome everyone that just joined. The men would come, they'll give her £25 or £30, and that would include the drinks, the food. She would give them scrambled eggs on toast, or scrambled eggs and tea and whatever. Then they'll come downstairs to the living room, where there was a bit of pornography being projected on the walls, and then there was a live show with the ladies. When I say the ladies, they were not all full-time sex workers. Some of them were home moms, some of them were teachers, some of them were secretaries, and they did that on top of everything else. And well, after the show, of course, the men would be given a luncheon voucher. Yes, you've heard this right, a luncheon voucher. There was a governmental scheme for companies to give a little lunch voucher to their employees, so they would get deals to go into the local restaurants instead of spending money on food. And there was kind of a deal for the working classes to eat more healthy. Hi Marty, and welcome everyone that just joined. By the way, we're just leaving Lambeth now. See the little yellow sign there? It says Wandsworth. So we've now left the gayest borough in London to enter the borough with the cheapest council taxes. I used to live in Lambeth, and I used to live in Wandsworth as well. So yeah, in Wandsworth you have the cheapest council taxes in London, and also one of the cheapest in England, apparently. Anyway, back to Cynthia. So yeah, those gentlemen would have their luncheon vouchers. Those little vouchers were already a bit of a joke. You know, the government had not risen the price of those vouchers for many years, and those parties actually lasted they went on for years. None of the neighbors had a clue. Of course, they'd seen a few gentlemen going in, but she told the closest neighbors, she told them that she was doing a lot of work conventions, because she was a business lady, you see. Well, she was a business lady, just a different type of business. Eventually, though, so after a few years of doing the parties here in Streatham, the police got an anonymous tip. We don't know who. I don't think she knows who. They started to investigate, and they did. They put the house under investigation. The police officers were standing, hiding in their cars parked on the street for about 12 days, counting how many people going in and out. So they got quite accustomed to seeing Cynthia going in and out. They saw over the course of 12 days 250 men and 50 ladies. They didn't have any evidence, though. They did see a lot of people going through, so they started to believe the anonymous tip, but how would you prove it? Eventually, one lady came out with the trash. You know, she was binning the trash. And the police officers hiding in their cars realized it was not a lady. It was a man dressing up as a lady. Little did they know it was a former RAF squadron leader. His name was Robert Mitchell Smith. He had been widowed, and he started to look into his interest into cross-dressing, and he met Cynthia, and he actually lived with her for a while. Anyway, he binned a large amount of trash. The police ran into the trash bag. Cynthia was actually watching at the window. She probably smiled because she knew she did not bin anything incriminating. She would burn all the condoms and the broken sex toys and everything in the basement. But the police officers did find a lot of bottles of alcohol. Yes, Tariq, Julie Waters did a lovely film about her life. It is free to watch on YouTube, although I didn't... well, you know what? I always struggle with older movies. I suppose it's different when you are a native speaker, but those old movies, the soundtrack is so bad, I don't understand everything they say. So I never really watched those movies that are from the 70s or 80s, because I just don't understand everything. Anyway, but good movie, I think. I've watched the beginning of it. Now, Cynthia was probably aware that they were looking into her, but the show must go on and the party must go on. And eventually, after 12 days, one morning, because the parties were often at lunchtime, you see, because she didn't want anyone to be suspicious. At lunchtime, all the ladies were in their kitchens and everything. And the parking slots in front of the house would stay available. She told them to park away and come on foot. Now, the police officers were ready to raid the building. They had seen many men going in. They knocked at the door. Cynthia opened. The chain was still on. She opened. When she realized it was the police, she closed the door. So they banged the door. They actually smashed the door because they saw it as a sign of resistance. And let's go to see a bit of the sunset by the lake. So we are now in Tutankhamun's, by the way. And as the police got in, well, the live show with the sex workers performing had just finished. Everyone was like half naked. They arrested some people. They saw a lot of toys and everything. They went upstairs and they could hear that people were at it in the bedrooms. Apparently, there's even a guy that refused to stop having sex. So he was there doing it in front of the police officers. Now, the police had enough. They did arrest her. She was trialed, but two years later, actually. Oh, thanks, Matthew. That's very much appreciated. So she went to trial, but the local community was, not the local, the general public in general, were pretty much in favor of Cynthia, because I'm taking a look because there are a lot of turtles in this lake. I don't see any. Sometimes when you look into those little branches there, you see turtles, but I don't see any. It would be a bit far to see them well on camera anyway, but anyway, so yeah, the public was in favor of Cynthia. And you know what? Although, of course, it is illegal, the ladies were actually not complaining. Some of them, one of them actually was interviewed and she said it was the best job she ever had. And she loved, she actually was talking at the present tense, because would you believe, Cynthia did not stop the parties. All those couple of years when she was still waiting for trial, she would still run the parties. But yeah, one of the sex workers said it was the best job and the safest job she ever had, that she never had to have sex with anybody anyway, and that money was not exchanged. Because when the police found the box with all the luncheon vouchers, Cynthia said, "Oh yes, this is for my gentlemen to satisfy their appetite." Well, money was actually exchanged. Cynthia would take the money at the beginning of the day, then the customers would give the vouchers to the sex workers, but at the end of the day, the sex workers would go down to Cynthia to exchange the voucher for the cash. So there was some money, but not as obvious, not cash flying around everywhere. And anyway, she was found guilty. 18 months in Holloway prison, although there was a petition to public opinion was, a lot of people were actually supporting Cynthia, and she was doing TV interviews. She was quite a smart lady, and the sentence was reduced to 6 months. When she came out of prison, one of her customers came and picked her up with a posh car, and she did a big V sign. Let me show you the sign. V for victory, and one might say V for vouchers, luncheon vouchers. And guess what? She went back to running the parties. Maybe not as big, maybe not as obvious, but the Met police officers, some of them did not really like the idea of having been humiliated by not securing a great prison sentence. So they decided to investigate her again, but they'll get more proofs this time. But before I tell you about that, let me show you an interesting fossil. This is a fossil tree. It's not from here. It's actually from Dorset. They brought it here in Victorian times, I think. So that's an interesting trunk. Now, when the police investigated again, one of them actually pretended to be an old customer. They sent Cynthia a letter posted from Egypt saying, "Oh, I'll be back in London soon. I hope you still run those amazing parties." And that worked. They got themselves invited, and they did come to a couple of those parties. The police officers, so it was two of them, they really tried to play the game and blend in. You had one that was called PC Stuart Taylor, and the other one was Jack Jones. Jack Jones, I think it's the one that he dressed up as a lady. He was really playing the game and cross-dressing himself. And eventually they came to a third party when what they had done is they had selected some banknotes with the serial numbers. They had written down the serial numbers, so they wanted to pay Cynthia to have some proofs that she had indeed taken some cash. So they came to the party, and apparently they were a bit rude. They were a bit insistent on giving her the money, and she did take it. At that point, they signaled to their colleagues that it was time to raid the building again. They did. She was arrested again. She was taken to court again, and maybe not as optimistic as she was the first time around. But actually, at court, everything played in her favor. The two police officers were kind of, some witness said that one of them had taken the number of a gentleman, and he asked them to meet later, and there was, would you believe? So Cynthia had every type of customers. One of them was her dad, Hamilton. In his later years, he actually wrote to Cynthia saying he'd heard about her line of work, and he was a bit lonely. And Cynthia was like, "Yeah, come to my parties." She did love to entertain, and she did love to make those older men happy, And to be completely fair to Cynthia, she did not live an opulent lifestyle, so she probably wasn't even making that much cash. Now, one of the police officers that had been involved in the first investigation ended up becoming a customer of Cynthia. And he came to court and he was like, "No, those two undercovers are lying. That didn't happen. They were rude. They were forcing the money into Cynthia. There's never any cash being exchanged and all that." And guess what? She was acquitted. When she was picked up after the trial, the journalist went to her and they were like, "Oh, Cynthia, what are you gonna do?" And she said, "I'll throw a party, of course." And she died many, many years later. Let me show you. There's a little cafe down here in the park. The commons are very, very large. London is very green, as you might know. We've got about 47% of London that is technically a green open space. We have over 3,000 parks on green open spaces in London. So we're gonna get out of the park here, but we could keep going and have more greenery and more greenery. Anyway, to finish about Cynthia, she lived another over 25 years, I think. She died in 2015 at the age of 82. So a very interesting character. She, obviously people that were alive at the time would remember. I don't know if the people living in the house today, I don't know if they know. I really should have told the lady earlier, but who knows? She probably thought I was a weirdo anyway, so I'm not sure it's best to go and approach girls on the street telling them about sex parties. Right. Now, let's move on to a different story. It's a story most of you would have heard. If you are a regular to my live streams, it is the case of Charles Bravo, the Balham murder mystery. We talked about it at his burial site in West Norwood Cemetery. Now, I'll tell you the same story today, but I'll show you the places. So you can get a sense of the distances, between the priory and between where Dr. Gully lived and between where Gully and Mrs. Cox actually met at the station and stuff, so you can get a feel of the places. If you've not seen my tour in West Norwood, don't worry, I'll tell you everything again. But first, let me show you the Priory. So the Priory is the place where a gentleman called Charles Bravo went to put himself into bed. He very probably had a drink from a jug of water that was next to his bed. And a few minutes later, he's screaming, "Florence, Florence, hot water!" Florence was sleeping or pretending to sleep. And he had been poisoned, antimony poisoning. So tartar emetic, it's a very violent poison. And he died. Well, it took 52 hours. We'll get back into the story in a moment, but he died. To this day, I'm just gonna step back. So it looks like the signal has dropped for a sec. Hopefully we should be back. Anyway, so yeah, this has been subdivided since Victorian times. There are at least 10 little apartments inside. One of them, I was just saying, I don't know if you've heard, but one of them is a gift for them to come for a viewing, because I just wanted to get into the Priory, but then I didn't. Oh, is it still buffering, Tish? I'm just gonna step back, hopefully it'll be a bit better. Let me know when it's better. Oh, I'm back, okay. Oh no. Right. Once it gets better, let me know. And if you can, let me know the last thing you've heard, so I can repeat whatever you've not heard. Now, so this is the place where Bravo died. And that's the place where he lived with Florence. Now, you might remember the main characters. We've got Florence, we've got Bravo, we've got Florence's former lover, Dr. James Gully. I'll show you where he lived, and then I'll tell you all the story again. Hopefully it's better now. So this is the Balham Lodge. This is, it's now a guest house. Do you care to guess how much is a night in the Balham Lodge? Don't cheat, don't go on Google. How much do you think that would cost you for a night in here? Booking last minute in June, because I suppose it varies quite a lot through the year. Let me know your guesses in the chat. But anyway, so that's where Dr. Gully lived, so just meters away from Florence, although he was not supposed to see her anymore. 200 Sam, no. Ooh, no guys, we're only in Balham, it's not that exciting. It's about between 80 and 100, depending on the bedroom. Let me show you the inside. There we go. So that's what the bedrooms look like. So it's not too bad, but to be honest, we're quite far south, you know, for tourists to get back into. I mean, they can take a train to Victoria and be in Victoria in 15 minutes, but it's not the most touristy area. Yeah, 75 Tish. In the winter, it's probably 75. At this time of the year now, it's between 80 and 100. Anyway, let me tell you the full story again, because some of you might not know the mystery of Charles Bravo. So, Florence Bravo, his wife, one of the main suspects, she was born in Australia. She was born Florence Campbell. She was from a very rich family. They had properties in Australia, in New Zealand, and across the country as well. And as a lady from society, you know, she was expected to marry proper. I'm not saying she'd have to go for an arranged marriage, but almost, you know. And at a party in Canada, she met a young man called Ricardo. Alexander Ricardo. He was extremely rich himself, so of course the two families were happy to marry them. She married Ricardo. He was in the army. He was a Coldstream Guard, you know, the same regiment as the one guarding Buckingham Palace and St. James's Palace and Windsor and all that. She did Well, she did kind of force him out of the army because at the time they would be posted all over the empire, you know, so she wanted him in London. And when he quit the army, he couldn't really find himself a purpose with his life back in London, and he started to drink a bit too much. Well, way too much. Now, Ricardo was a bit violent. Now, before we go much further, in one of those streets, actually the one before that, there was a lady that lived here in well, it was reported in 82, but it might have happened a little bit before that. She was a school teacher, a retired school teacher, Mrs. Barker. And right next to the Priory on the next street, there was a house that had been demolished. So she asked permission to go on, she wanted to go to scavenging in the garden, you know, like she wanted to go and pick up a few plants before everything was destroyed. And as she's in the garden next to the Priory, so it was her and her daughter Diana. They suddenly there was like a cold smoke, and the dog went crazy and ran away into the commons. So they were like, "Oh, there must be, you know, there must be some kind of a presence." The daughter actually ran after the dog, and Mrs. Barking came back a couple of days later to look at the plants again. And then looking at the back of the Priory. Oh, I've not showed you. Let me show you the back of the Priory. So that's what it looked like in the 1870s. She said she saw a young girl in front of a tree, but she could clearly see that the girl was not alive because she was kind of transparent. She could still see the tree. It was a girl with a blue dress. Apparently, she was quite shocked, and she came home and she did a sketch of the girl. And later on the next day, she actually painted the girl. I wish I could have access to the painting. I don't think it's been published anywhere on the internet. But apparently at that point she had no idea. But later on she saw a portrait of Florence Bravo. And she was like, that's the girl, that's the ghost I saw in the garden. So the Priory is haunted. There's one of the tenants in one of the apartments, apparently they had an exorcism because they had enough of seeing some kind of a shape. So yeah, it is said to be a haunted building. Anyway, back to the story. Florence is married with Ricardo. Ricardo is an alcoholic, he's violent, she has enough. But at the time you couldn't get a divorce. I mean, you could, but you'd have to claim it on something really bad, like bestiality, or, you know, you couldn't just get a divorce because you were bored of your husband. So they kind of separated, but didn't divorce quite yet. Her parents were against it anyway. They were hoping she'd make it better. And she went into a depression. And eventually her family sent her to what today we'd call a retreat. Back in the day they would call it an asylum, but don't imagine like a lunatic asylum, more like a retreat doing hydrotherapy with a doctor that was 37 years her senior, a very famous doctor. He had treated the like of Charles Dickens and all that, called Dr. James Gully. And Gully he was known for taking ladies' issues very seriously. Because at the time, you know, ladies' issues were kind of brushed off. People thought that ladies were hysterical and that's it, you know. Gully actually believed that too much pressure was put on ladies to be a perfect housewife and everything, and he understood them much better. And Gully and Florence had a very good relationship. He made her feel much better. Maybe a bit too good. They started an affair. Now, if that was to be known, that was absolutely scandalous. Gully was married. His wife was about 14 years his senior. She was already in some kind of a home, you know, like a retirement home. But still, he was married. And Florence, although she was going through a separation, and Alexander at that point is living with his mistress anyway, but technically she's still married. And then, out of the blue, Alexander died. Probably alcohol poisoning. Now, he had not changed his will yet. So all his fortune went to Florence. With that money, she bought the Priory, the house we've just seen a moment ago. And then Gully moved in right here. So they were very close to one another, although of course they did not live together. That would have been scandalous. Their affair had almost been outed once. One of the servant girl actually opened the bedroom and found them in bed. But Florence ran and she bribed the girl into silence. And then a few weeks later, she was invited in Surrey, into the house of some friends of hers, solicitors. And she invited Dr. Gully to come and say hello. And then when the host went for a little walk, they came back a bit early to pick up some umbrellas. They found Dr. Gully and Florence, they were at it on the sofa. Unacceptable. And that's how they were outed. And for Florence, it was horrible, because suddenly, you know, she was a loose woman, a lady, especially a lady from society like she was. It was such a shame on the family and on everything. And at that point, she also fell pregnant from Dr. Gully, of course. The abortion, or the decision to have an abortion, was pretty much made by society. You know, there was no way she could have had a child. And Dr. Gully actually performed an illegal abortion on her. It worked. She didn't have the baby, but you know, she didn't feel very well. She was a bit depressed again, and that's when she started to she decided to stop the affair with Gully. She told him that she wanted to bring the relationship back to a professional relationship, so they broke off. At that point, Gully said to his servant not to admit anyone from the Priory to his place ever again. And Florence was a bit depressed. She had hired a lady of company. A lady of company, it's not, it sounds a bit like a sex worker. It's not, it's a servant called Mrs. Jane Cox. Mrs. Jane Cox became very close to Florence. She almost acted a bit like a surrogate mother to Florence. You know, the two became very close. And Mrs. Cox decided to help. She kind of engineered a meeting between Florence and a young man she knew, Charles Bravo. They knew from Jamaica. The two of them had properties in Jamaica. Bravo and Florence met. They liked each other very much. Let me show you a picture of the two of them. And they decided to get married. Now, Bravo, let's face it, he was attracted to her money. And Florence, she wanted a whitewash. She wanted to be married again and respectable again. But before to marry, she decided to tell him. She had to tell him the truth. She had to tell him that she'd had an illegal abortion, that she had an affair with Dr. Gully, because she did not want him to find out with local gossip later on. So she did tell him. And Bravo was like, okay, you know what, if we are going to be honest with one another, I've had an illegitimate child myself. I've had an affair with a lady in the Midlands. So let's start again new, and we tell each other everything. And you promise you're never going to mention Gully ever again. Florence did say okay, and then they decided to get married anyway. The date of the marriage was actually pushed forward, so they might, at that point she probably was pregnant, because she couldn't have refused herself to him anyway, because, you know, she admitted having an affair, so that was she was a bit stuck anyway. So they did marry. Although she did decide to use a new law where ladies could be in charge of their money. That was very new, because before that, when you married, everything that belonged to you as a lady would suddenly belong to your husband. That's the way it was. And Bravo was not happy. Bravo wanted to be in charge of the money. All the money was hers. She had everything. He had nothing. Anyway, he moved into the Priory. He started to take charge of everything. He actually fired a few of the staff. One of them was Joseph Griffiths. He was the coachman. They had a little accident on Bond Street with the coach, and Bravo fired him. Now, you know, he was in charge. That was just the dynamic between men and women at the time. Then Florence had a miscarriage, and then another one. Her health started to deteriorate quite badly, but Bravo wanted an heir. He wanted a little Charles II. He wanted a son. So he was pushing for more sex, and she probably was scared. She probably was scared of not even surviving another miscarriage, you know. And then that leads us to that night. He went for, he had been a bit sick in the weeks before, so he might have been already poisoned, who knows. And that day he went for a ride on his horse, and the horse actually bolted. The horse went running for a few kilometers. So Charles came home. He was a bit shaken, but all right. They had the dinner and they started to argue because Florence she got a bit drunk. She had drunk a bit too much at dinner. He put himself into bed. They were sleeping separately because she was still recovering from the miscarriage. And that's when, a few minutes later, he's shouting, "Florence, Florence, hot water." No one reacted, although the bedroom was just next to the other one, you know. It's actually the little servant Marie-Anne that came and woke up Florence. Marie-Anne, in her statement, she kind of almost insinuates that Florence was faking the sleep. She doesn't really say it that way, but actually her testimonies are quite interesting. And then only Mrs. Cox stands up and she's trying to help him. And all the treatments she applied were actually quite consistent with poisoning. Did she know that he had been poisoned, or did she just guess? But anyway, that's an interesting little topper here. That is to take care of the planet. But usually those toppers, you know, they are knitted. This is like a 3D art. I kind of like this bit here with the drying clothes rack. Anyway, back to our story. Sorry. So yeah, whether Florence was awake or not, she was probably drunk anyway. She had a bit too much, and then once she got into bed, she had sent the servant for more wine, so that's why Bravo was not happy. Now, Bravo struggled. He was in and out of consciousness for about 52 hours. And that's when Jane Cox had actually called the doctor that lived in here in Balham. No, actually, she called the doctor from Streatham. And then Florence was like, "Why? He's an hour away. Call a doctor from Balham." So she called another doctor. In total, 6 doctors attended. And Florence's reaction to her husband's illness was actually quite consistent with innocence. You know, she was panicked. She was all over the place. She sent the coachman to send a letter to call another very famous doctor, Sir William Gull. William Gull, not to be confused with Gully. William Gull was a physician. He was actually the Queen's physician, Queen Victoria. He's the one, we talked about him through my Jack the Ripper tour. Now, this is the Bedford Hotel. Well, pub today, but it used to be a pub and hotel. This is where the inquest into the Bravo case happened, in the billiard room, which is also said to be haunted. And this is also the place where George Griffiths, you know, the coachman that had been fired, he had been sacked by Bravo. One night, he'd been seen in the pub by the landlord. He was a bit pissed, but he said Bravo would get what's coming to him. He'll be dead in 4 months. Well, was it a coincidence? Because 4 months later, he was indeed dead. But George actually, he had a motive. He would have had a motive to kill Bravo because, well, he had been sacked, but 3 days later, he already had a new job in Herne Hill in Kent. And he was a good, skilled coachman, you know. It wasn't hard for him to find a new job. Now, he had a motive and he had tartar emetic because he was the coachman, he was in charge of the stables. And he had gone to Streatham to a chemist to buy the tartar emetic. But again, that wasn't even that weird because at the time, many people would have this type of poisons for the stables. That was used with livestock in very smaller quantities. And to be honest, George had always been, he'd never denied any of it. He said to the police, yes, I've been talking shit at the Bedford because I was drunk. And he was actually not referring to any murder or anything. He was referring to a dog bite. Apparently, Bravo had been bitten by a dog, and that was weeks before. And then George was like, yeah, he's going to be dead in 4 weeks. Now, before we go much further, the Bedford, it is said to be haunted. It's a lovely pub. They have a little theatre space. They do music gigs and comedy gigs. Some people like Ed Sheeran or Eddie Izzard have done some very early performances in there. And in the 70s, they had a problem with a ghost. Well, they've always had the ghost in the billiard room. That's where the inquest into the Bravo case, that's where the inquest happened. But after a gig, I think it was a jazz group playing, but there's a piano that fell off stage. No one pushed it. Everyone believed it was the ghost. Everyone did, even the landlord. So the landlord eventually had to call a psychic. The psychic didn't get much really, but they do believe it might be the ghost of Charles Bravo. He's coming back to the room of the inquest because he's not happy. I said the inquest, it's the second inquest. The first inquest actually happened at the Priory, where we were earlier, but they concluded open verdict. No one was happy with that. The Campbells were not happy. The Bravos were not happy. So there was a second inquest here at the pub, where they concluded murder by persons or persons unknown, but they didn't have enough evidence to convict anyone. Now, we say murder, we don't even know whether it was a murder. The main theory, the first theory, was actually that Bravo had taken his own life. Out of the 6 doctors that were called, only one believed it was suicide. It's Sir William Gull. But Gull was said to be a Freemason and Mr. Campbell as well. So did they maybe try to help each other? We don't know. Anyway, Gull was convinced that because Bravo was in and out of consciousness, never did he cry murder. Never did he accuse anyone. If anything, he was quite chilled. The doctors asked him, what did you take? He said laudanum for my toothache. And the doctors were like, no, this is not laudanum. Tell us what you've taken. Because if you don't tell us, you're gonna go down, someone is gonna go down for murder. And he said, well, if it's not laudanum, I don't know what it is. Now, if he had taken the poison and changed his mind, he wouldn't tell the authorities or the doctors, because at the time, it was considered a crime to try to take your own life. So if he had done that and then recovered, you don't want to go down for murder, Now, that's one of the theories, that he might have done it himself. He didn't really have a motive but sometimes people are depressed and you don't know, it's really hard to know what happened in anybody's head, really. The other theory is, of course, murder. If it was murder, though, who could have done it? Florence could not have done it alone, because she did not really come back into the room. So yes, she could have done the poisoning. She could have put it in the water jug. We do believe it's the water jug because they investigated everything they had at dinner and stuff, and it doesn't. And the thing is, tartar emetic, it's very quick. And he had a habit of drinking from his water jug every night before to go to bed. Even his friends from uni, they knew. Do you want to take a look at the prices? And so yeah, the water jug was probably where the poison was put. And Florence did not come back in the bedroom. It was actually Jane Cox. And she actually washed the jug before the doctors could examine the vomit. And Jane Cox told the doctors, but hours later, she told them that Bravo had told her he'd taken the poison and not to tell Florence. Now, the little Marie-Anne, the other servant, was in the same room, and she's not heard that. And the doctors were like, oh, why didn't you say that earlier? And she was like, I've told you. But the doctors were like, no, we've never heard that from you. So Jane looks very suspicious. She did have a motive as well, because she had been fired by Bravo. He had given her 1 month's notice. But later on, some historians discovered that although she probably was not happy about losing her job, and she had 3 boys to feed, well, she was going to come into a bit of an inheritance. She had an aunt in Jamaica that was going to leave her a massive amount of land after she died. So she wouldn't have been too stressed about money. Now, the weeks prior to the murder, Jane Cox and Dr. Gully were spotted 5 times. A couple of times here, this is Balham train station. A couple of times they were spotted talking on the platform up there. Was it a coincidence? Well, you know, they both live 10 minutes away. But it's interesting from a man that said he didn't want anyone from the Priory to be admitted into his house anytime ever again. And apparently she had told him about Florence's miscarriages, and he had produced little bottles of medicine for Florence. Those bottles were never to be seen again. Was it the poison? It is possible. It is very possible, because it was never dropped at the Priory. It was given to Jane Cox, where she lived in Notting Hill. Why so far away? Because they didn't want to look suspicious. You know, all the crime specialists, they've all written about the Bravo case. And of course, Agatha Christie had a go. Agatha, she actually believed Gully to be guilty. And Gully could hardly do it alone, because he couldn't really get inside of the Priory. I mean, he probably could have, but discreetly. So was it Gully and Jane Cox? Maybe. Was it Florence and Jane? That's very possible. It does look like, if indeed it was murder, it does look like Jane has tried to cover. She's the one that cleaned the vomit. She's the one that lied, or at least told the police and the doctors that Bravo had said he'd taken the poison himself. And let's go down the main road. So I'll show you a little street. So this way you see a bit more of Balham. I'll show you a little street that's kind of cute with a lot of independent coffee shops and stuff. Now, Jane, I mean, if it is murder, it could be Florence and Jane. It could be Jane alone. It could be Jane on Gully. But there's another theory. It could also be manslaughter. And it could actually be an accident both ways. It could have been, and I actually kind of believe that theory, it could have been the other way around. It could have been Bravo that was poisoning Florence. And he might have messed up, he might have drunken from the wrong glass. Because you see, antimony was used. It was used to stop people drinking. You drop little traces of antimony in their alcohol, and people would start to vomit and be unwell. That would put them off of the drink. Did Florence do that with her first husband, Alexander? That's also possible. But it's very possible that Bravo did that to Florence. Because, you know, antimony can also have some kind of vaginal... well, we might have spoken about that when we talked about not Thomas Nilkrim, George Chapman, the Southwark poisoner, he was poisoning his girlfriends / wives with antimony, and some of them had some vaginal discharge and stuff. So could the slow poisoning have induced the miscarriages? It is possible, and if he indeed was poisoning his wife to stop her from drinking, and if he indeed drank by accident, that could have explained why he didn't accuse anyone of murder, because he knew exactly what had happened. Because, for example, Sir William Gull said no one would be so chilled about their own death. Because for the 52 hours when he was in and out of consciousness, even actually edited his will to give everything to his wife. Although he had nothing to leave, I mean, all the money was hers. But anyway, he didn't look like a man that suspected his wife. So it could have been an accident, manslaughter on himself, or it could have been the other way around. It could have been Florence that was slowly poisoning him to stop his libido. Because you see, apparently, according to some historians, sometimes ladies would do that. Let's not forget that Florence was really scared of being pregnant again, because she'd suffered so much from those 2 miscarriages, physically and probably mentally as well, but physically she hardly recovered. And also, according to her medical records, it does look like he was forcing her into anal. Well, or maybe that was because she didn't want to get pregnant, but she had some discomfort on the backside. So yeah, we don't know. Maybe she did give him little traces of antimony to stop his sexual advances. So this is the little street that's pedestrianized and quite cool, with independent shops and coffee shops. Obviously, everything is closed at this time on an evening, but at daytime it's quite cute. Now, if it was Florence, how would she put 10 times the amount by accident? That was a large amount of antimony he had taken. You know, you'd have enough to kill him 10 times. Did she really? I mean, maybe she was drunk, remember? So maybe she did try to put a little trace and she was a bit drunk and didn't realize how much she'd put. And if indeed that was an accident, and then that could explain why Jane Cox helped her, or tried to help her cover up. And let's not forget that after the trial, so no one was found guilty, but everyone's life was ruined. Florence and Jane did not speak to one another. Jane Cox moved up to Birmingham. Florence moved on to the South Coast, where she died 2 years later. She did say that she was not going to survive this, and she did not. She drank herself to death. But the very fact that the 2 ladies never spoke again kind of highlights, I mean, for me, it shows that it probably wasn't a planned murder. It's probably Cox that would have, on the moment, decided to help her mate and cover up for her, and then she probably hated Florence for having been put through that, because Jane was one of the strongest suspects. You know, she had to move away herself to avoid all the drama, and Gully moved to Austria, because his reputation was ruined as well in the country. So the 3 of them split away. They never saw each other again, and their lives were ruined. You know. To this day, we still don't know who's done it. If I could solve, or if I could have the answer to, if I could speak to a little magic voice that would tell me the answer to one historical murder, I think I'll pick this one, because it has to be one of them. But who? They all have a motive. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me flip the camera around. And let me know if you have any questions about anything before we go. If not, thank you very much for coming today. I hope you enjoyed seeing because we talked about those locations in the past when we We talked about the case in the cemetery. So now you've seen a bit of Balham and you've seen the places where it happened. If you're watching on replay, if you have any theories about who's done it, you can also leave it in the comments. Thanks, Tish. Thanks everyone for coming today. It's always a pleasure to have so many of you on board. If any of you dropped me a little tip on PayPal or buy me a coffee, that's very much appreciated. It is really thanks to all your generosity that I can keep going and produce more lives and videos and all that. Oh, thank you, Pauline. That's very, very much appreciated. Nikki, whatever is more convenient for you. I get a bit less commission with PayPal, but I think it's good for the algorithms on YouTube because it's the best form of engagement. So if you prefer YouTube, that's absolutely fine with me because I think it's a bit better for the algorithms, and this way YouTube might show my videos to more people if they generate more money. So whatever is more comfortable for you. Thanks Wendy, thanks Lee, thanks Pauline, thanks everyone for coming today. If you want to see a bit more of me, next week Tuesday or Wednesday, no, Tuesday, next week's Tuesday, the 16th, whatever that is, we're going back down to Brompton Cemetery. You might remember we've been there before, but I'll try to get the cemeteries covered at this time of the year because that's of course when it's bright a bit later. You see it's nearly, it's over 9 p.m. and it's still bright. Actually, it should be sunset right now in 10 minutes. But yeah, the cemeteries, it's nice because if I do them too early in the afternoon, a lot of you are still in bed in America. So I'll try to get the cemeteries covered in the next few weeks. So we've got Brompton next week. After that, I'm taking you to France. We'll get back into the case of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. That's the biggest murder. It's not a murder mystery as such because we know who's done it, but it's the biggest escape. It's like our Lord Lucan. And I would argue he's even more famous in France than Lord Lucan in the UK. He's the type of guy that got away with murder, well, 5 murders, and has escaped somewhere. Oh, has he? Did he never leave? Did he actually take his own life? We don't know. But I'll tell you the story again, and I'll show you the spot where he was last seen in south of France. So the murders happened in Nantes. You might remember I told you that story a couple of years ago now, but he had a long escape route through the country, really. And he was last seen in Roquebrune-sur-Argence. I'll take you there. And now a lot of people believe him to be in Texas. But I'll tell you about all those developments once we get there. And after that, I've not scheduled it yet, but a few days later, I'll take you down to Nice on the French Riviera. So we've got 2 live streams in France. Anyway, thank you guys for coming. Have a great evening or a great morning or whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.